Hello heroes and henchmen, my name is Isekai, and this is a video about Overlord, the Isekai genre, and how to use a magical world premise to say something meaningful. Before we get into it though, say hello to Lex, who's lending me their service in editing this video. This is a bit of an experiment, so if you have any feedback on the editing style, please do leave it down in the comments. I've been able to hire Lex because of your generous support on Patreon, so thank you all very much for that. Anyway, let's talk about anime. Overlord is one of my favorite anime in a good long while, and honestly, that was a bit of a surprise to me since I've always been lukewarm at best about Isekai, that is, the trapped in another world genre of anime. Isekai is of course nothing new. Stories about ordinary people being transported into fantasy worlds have been part of human storytelling since, well, probably since always. The underlying premise of Isekai is essentially the same as the underlying premise of Harry Potter, Alice in Wonderland, or The Wizard of Oz. It's an opportunity to explore a fantastical world from the relatable vantage point of a person who shares our real-world perspective. My issue with Isekai isn't really anything to do with the conventions of the genre, but rather the shallowness with which a lot of shows execute on it. For example, Harry Potter uses the idea of a parallel magical world to illustrate how bigotry takes hold when groups of people start to think of themselves as inherently superior to others. That's who Voldemort and the Death Eaters are. In Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, the spirit world premise allows the story to explore, among many other things, the corrupting nature of greed, how compassion and kindness are our greatest source of strength against monsters, the importance of childhood memories, and humanity's relationship to the natural world. So a big part of the reason why these are great and compelling stories is that they use their magical realities as a means to say something interesting and compelling and true. My trouble with a lot of Isekai is that there's a tendency for the genre to use the magical world as little more than a playground, an excuse to give the characters magic and superpowers because they look cool, a means for wish fulfillment without critical examination of what that wish fulfillment means. If you want a demonstration of just how bad this kind of storytelling can get, well, go watch a few episodes of The Master of Ragnarok and Blessar of Einherjar and you will understand. Or better yet, don't, it's terrible. So all of this leads us on to Overlord, because Overlord is absolutely a wish fulfillment show. In fact, wish fulfillment is central to the story, but what makes Overlord clever, and I would argue brilliant, is how it shows the consequences of the kind of wish fulfillment that is central to so much of Isekai. As the show opens, we learn that for our protagonist Ainz, Yggdrasil and the friends that he made in that MMO are pretty much the only good things in his life. It was the only time in his life when he had a social connection, friends, structure, a real purpose. The game world is, if anything, more real to him, a more important part of his life and who he is as a person than anything he has experienced in the real world. And so, as he stalks through the abandoned guild hall wallowing in nostalgia, he wishes more than anything else that he could have that experience again. To find connections with people, to go on adventures and quests, to work towards a grand goal with his friends and guildmates, to experience victories and defeats again. And his wish is granted. As the servers shut down and Yggdrasil comes to an end, he is perhaps transported, perhaps transformed, perhaps trapped in a new and exciting fantasy world that he's never seen before. And the NPCs, who were once lifeless AIs simply following orders, become real people with minds, with souls, with bodies, with their own desires and agendas and hidden lives. He is given, as though by magic, a chance to do it all over again, to have adventures, to build connections, to overcome challenges, to have purpose. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. When you play a video game, especially an MMO, what are the NPCs of that world to you? The people, the monsters, the nations, the history. Even if you are a very dedicated role player and deeply invested in the game, it is and will remain just a game. The people aren't real, the history doesn't have real weight, it doesn't matter, it's fiction, not reality. When you are given a quest to go and save 10 slaves from the abuse of the evil Ogre King, you go and do so knowing full well that the 10 slaves you rescue will respawn in a minute or two, being replaced with other completely identical slaves, and then those will be rescued by another player, and then another one, and then another one. And however many slaves are rescued by however many players, there will always be a quest giver there to tell someone to go and rescue 10 slaves from the evil Ogre King. Their peril isn't real, and neither is their suffering. It's just entertainment. So, what if it was real? What if these were real people? What if they were people with souls, histories, relationships, thoughts, feelings, real fates, and real destinies, as real as you or me? And what if you came along and treated them like just another game mechanic, just another checklist to clear on the way to the next level up, just a bit of entertainment? Well, you'd be Ainsul Gaon, wouldn't you? In the first season, we are introduced to the adventuring guild Swords of Darkness, Peter, Lukra, Dine, and Ninja. They offer to help Ainz out as he's just starting out as an adventurer, and we spend several episodes getting to know them. We see them interact, tease each other, help each other, and we learn about their long-term goal to find the legendary swords of one of the 13 heroes. And we learn about Ninja's quest to free his sister from the nobleman who has kidnapped her. And then they're murdered by Clementine. Ainz's reaction to this, in spite of all the time they spent together, in spite of all the time they got to know each other, is mild annoyance. He was using them as tools to raise his fame, and their deaths merely interrupted him. He kills Clementine not so much out of vengeance as out of annoyance at having his game interrupted. And this is a move that Overlord likes to pull over and over again. In Season 2, we are introduced to the Lizard Men, an honorable people struggling to recover from a terrible and tragic civil war. They go through struggles and peril, they form friendships and alliances and fall in love, and all of that is rendered utterly irrelevant when Ainz decides to use them as a training exercise for one of his henchmen. In Season 3, the show spends a great deal of time introducing us to the worker group Foresight, who are carefully portrayed as full persons with histories and ambitions of their own. Arche, in particular, is given a carefully constructed personal arc of working hard to pay off her abusive parents' debts so she can take her younger siblings away to live a better life. Foresight is contracted to enter Nazarick as part of Ainz's own plan to announce himself to the world, and Ainz personally kills them for doing exactly what he wanted them to do. And then, as if to drop the anvil on our heads as hard as possible, the show cuts away to Arche's adorable younger siblings happily awaiting her return, ignorant that she has died at the whims of Ainsul Gaon. The show is not being subtle. Ainz, however, is not merely a monster, not just an over-the-top sociopath. It's not that he's a cackling madman delighting in the suffering of others. It's rather that he simply doesn't care that much about them. He doesn't care if they suffer. He doesn't care if they die because they're not quite real to him. The only people that Ainz really cares about, the only people he thinks are real, are the denizens of Nazarick, who he created alongside his friends, and he shows himself to be quite capable of kindness and empathy towards them. He treats Aura and Mare with fatherly affection. He carefully listens to Albedo's feelings before he goes to fight Shaltir, and he frets over giving the employees of Nazarick days off to rest and give them decent pay. So he's not a monster, he's a player. He treats the very real people of this new world he has come to exactly the same way that a gamer treats the NPCs of any other video game. And what makes it even worse is that despite all of his power, all of his high-level MMO no-life magic skills and PvP abilities, Ainz kinda sucks at being an overlord. He spends as much, if not more, of the series just kinda going along with the whims of his underlings than charting out his own course. Demiurge, in particular, accidentally manipulates Ainz into committing to long-term complicated projects that he never intended to, and Ainz only goes along with it because he's worried that if he shows weakness or doesn't live up to their expectations, his underlings will lose their loyalty and desert him. The genocidal invasion of the Riestes capital, where Demiurge abducts thousands of people and destroys countless families, doesn't happen specifically because Ainz wants it, but because Demiurge assumes he wants it. To Ainz, saving face in front of his underlings is literally more important than the lives of innocent women and children. And this, I think, is the real theme, or at least the most interesting theme of Overlord. Ainz is living the ultimate wish fulfillment fantasy. Reality has bent itself over backwards to give him what he wanted, and the result is a selfish, petty man with the power of an unleashed god wreaking havoc on the world around him for no better reason than to get famous enough that he might run into an air quotes real person, another player. Remember how at the start of this video, we talked about how great Trapped in Another World stories use their alternate realities to make a point about their subject matter? Well, this is why I think Overlord qualifies as great, because it's not just a wish fulfillment story. It's a story about the consequences and the cost of wish fulfillment. It's a story about the kind of person you turn into when you treat other people as unimportant side characters in the story of your life. The kind of person you become when you think of your self-image and your personal prestige as more important than doing the right thing. Now, hang on, I can hear you say. Ainz only loses his empathy towards other people because he's undead, and therefore he doesn't have human emotions, and there's that weird emotion-suppressing effect that happens, and there's an explanation for all of it within the story, right? Which, yeah, of course there is, but we're not really talking about the diegetic explanations that the story invents for its own action. We're talking about the themes and the metaphors that those explanations represent. Ainz's emotional detachment works as a metaphor for the cold and detached mentality that we all fall into when we play games, especially MMOs. When we free our 10 slaves from the evil Ogre King and leave the rest to rot, or for some other player to deal with, we are all behaving like liches, because that's what the game wants from us. Now, I don't want to give anyone the impression that I think Ainz is a bad character. In fact, I think the opposite. I think he's an amazing character, because in spite of the many, good God, so many things he does wrong, in spite of all his failings, in spite of all his weaknesses, I look at him and his loneliness and his fear of being left behind by the last human connections that he has left, and his uncertainty and his play acting and his pretending, and yeah, I can see some of myself in that. Some of myself at my worst. And while most of us never go as far as to become omnipotent undead sorcerer kings, treating other people like they're not real and don't matter, treating people like NPCs in the game of your life, that's something humans do. It's something we do a lot. And so I think when Overlord shows us this exaggerated, cartoonish fantasy vision of the damage that that attitude and that behavior can do, it's telling us something that's true, something we can learn from. And that's what makes a story great. At least I think so. Hey, thank you very much for watching. Like I said at the top of the video, I commissioned the editing on this video from Lex, and if you have any feedback on the editing style or the way it was put together, please do put that down in the comments. This is still kind of in the experimental phase. If you want to help me pay Lex a good wage for their work, well, you can head on over to Patreon. The money that's pledged there will be used to help pay for editors to help me make better videos. And the better the Patreon does, the more often I'll be able to afford hiring outside help and paying them a good wage. Of course, if you can't support on Patreon, don't worry about it. Watching the video is plenty help enough. So, YouTube stuff. Please do click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell icon and the dislike button if that's more. You just click things. Click all of the things. YouTube wants your clicks, and I don't want to be buried by the algorithm, so click on some things and maybe watch some videos and stuff. Or don't. I mean, I really don't know.